Okay, let's see if I can get this going. So, hi everyone. Oh, we have people already tuning in. That's awesome. Welcome. Tonight I'm going to do some game prep slash map work, so to speak. So I'm going to work on stuff for my campaign, but it will be stuff that eventually will be incorporated into the big Greyhawk map bundle as well, so to speak. So for those who doesn't know, my campaign is set in the Southern Shield lands, and we have it here. So here is I'm just gonna zoom out a little bit here. My computer gets a little bit overwhelmed when I stream and do stuff, so I should probably kill off Illustrator a little bit. Hi Pete Bog, and hi Mr. D, welcome. That's awesome. You waved like Manic Santa Elf. That's awesome. Yeah. So my campaign. This is for those who come here mainly for the map technology and stuff. This is my campaign, the world of Greyhawk, the oldest D&D campaign world. That's where I have most of my map making is for Greyhawk, and then I do a lot of other stuff for commission work and stuff. But today I'm going to work on maps primarily for my own campaign, and then they will be inserted into the whole Greyhawk scheme of things. So we're going to look at this area here, the Southern Shield lands, and in particular the area just north of the town of Dillard. And the town of Dillard, the village of Orona, those are things set from my campaign. And the Prina, a little village, and these are things that I've added into my little... Hi Brian, welcome. So these are things that I've added, like all of these stuff here. A lot of this will make it into the public version of my map too, so along with some backstories and stuff that will come too. So if we take a look at this area here around Dillard, and I'm going to minimize this, and then we go in here, and here we have a much more detailed map. So here we have the town of Dillard. That is a small town that is situated on a little island in the middle of this the Sandstein River that flows out into the Lake of Nyrdiv. That is the lake of unknown depths that is in the middle of Greyhawk. And then the area of interest is a small village here that I've set across a small little river that flows into the Sandstein, and this one is called the Sorrow Stream because it originates up in the hills here to the west a bit. So here we have what it's called Sorrow Lake, and the reason for that is that this is Maiden Peak, and the legends has it that back in old times, girls who didn't want to get married to whoever they were assigned to be married to, they threw themselves off this cliff, and then they were simply splattered down into the lake, and then it became the Lake of Sorrow, and then this became the Sorrow Stream. And this is kind of, it's cut into, it's an ancient kind of fault line or something. So this river kind of, there is like steep, cracky or stony cliffs and banks on either side of it. So it's only this area here, especially this bit here, that is actually fairly easy to traverse from one end to the other. So that's why they built, back in the Shieldland days, they actually built a river or a bridge across the river here, and it was called the Merin Bridge. So this little village became the Merin Bridge, and it's a small little community that grew up around maintaining the bridge, and have some fees and taxes and stuff around it. And also there's a couple of fishermen who gathered around here, so they can, and there were two reasons: they can go out and fish in the river, and they could also ship down logs and stuff from, they had a logging camp up here, and I'm going to, that's something we can see if we can add that here. So they had a logging camp up here where they logged up in the hills, and then they actually transported all the logs down the river, and then they loaded them onto bigger barges or something here. So that was one other reason to have a little village here. So that was the idea, so to speak, for the village. And here I've taken this area and made a bigger map out of it. And originally all houses were kind of in good condition, but then IUs came and invaded the whole place, and a lot of it became kind of derelict and was probably burned down in the war, etc. So now we need to kind of take some of these, and I've already started here. So I've kind of made this here is a fairly fresh ruin. It was like a fairly impressive manor house that was burned down and kind of destroyed during the war. And this pile here is actually an older ruin of what used to be the Merin Keep back in the days. In the early days, like hundreds of years ago, this was a keep in order to protect this strategic little gap. When they had the first bridge here, they had a keep up here, and that was in the early days of the Origians, and they had to keep on this side because they wanted the enemy was on the other side of the river, so they had it on the southern side. And then the Iusians now have built a new guard house on this side because they're more scared of others coming north, so to speak. So that's the latest addition. And they also built these two round guard towers on either side of the river, and they're going to try and build a keep. I'm going to see if we can add this into it here. So now I'm going to, the first order of the day is to make several of these houses into ruins. So the buildings themselves I've actually added in using a software called Dungeon Fog. So I just created the roofs. So first we need to shade the roofs a little bit here. So I'm going to take here we have, this is the, hang on a second, this is the roof layer. So I'm going to create a new shady layer here, and I'm going to give it multiply. And then I'm going to take all the areas from, I'm going to give it a mask, so we only shade the actual roofs. So now now I can go in here and use, like we did on the terrain maps, I can just use a black and white and just paint in shading on the some side. Some of them look a little bit, they look kind of even, so I'm going to shade off some of the areas here. So I'm going to shade that side, and this one is kind of tricky because it is, I'm going to shade it just a little bit there. This one is way more, need more shade on that side. I'm using the shade from the building itself here as a guide, so that's the general shade a bit here. So there we go. And that one doesn't need, I'm going to keep a little bit here, just like that. And I put a lot of buildings that are actually sitting in, so they don't get any shade. This one gets some shade though. And I have the brush set at 13%, so it's very, very minor shading, so to speak. So I need to paint many times, but I want to have that kind of gradual look here. And these are kind of old little shacks that just have very temporary or kind of just have branches and or like thatch and stuff on the roof. So this is a poor place now, and these are some poor fishermen who are fled from various other places and settled down here after the war. So it's now it's in that gray zone of just being liberated, so to speak, or in the process of being liberated from the grip of IUs in my campaign. So I'm going to shade in the roofs here. There we go. We can shade that one a little bit more here. Okay. We have that one over here. We have a couple of more ones. So we can shade these. And some of them are they're too colorful. We'll see if we can do something about that too. Okay. So there we have shading done. Let's save this here. Now we'll see if we can make a couple of more ruins and wreck some of them here. So we have, this is the layer under it, so I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to take the shading and this and put it in a folder, I think, and call it buildings. And the reason for that is that I can use that to mask out the buildings for maybe I should try it. I can mask out the ones that I don't want, and we can ruin them, that one. But before we do that, these look so shiny and colorful, so let's see if we can actually get rid of some of that. I'm going to do a hue saturation adjustment layer to that, and hang on a second, there we go. Yeah, a little bit, and something like that. That looks a little bit better, I think. Maybe they're too dark. I'm going to... There we go. I think that's better. I'm going to keep it that way. Okay, now we can go in here and see what we can do if we want to. I want to turn some of these into ruins, so they're just, and this I'm going to start with this building here and make it into a ruin, because this is the guardhouse that they built in during IU's times. So it's a cheap. I can show some interior plans for it too fairly soon here. So, but this house here, I'm not really sure. I just thought it should be a house there, and now I don't know what to do with it. So, so let's ruin it in the war and see. Now we need to have much more oomph in the, a little bit less flow, and we have some texture. Let's do this and then go in here and just going to keep some of the walls. And this doesn't look particularly realistic because you don't have the internal shading, and because the ground should still have some traces of it. So that's why and that is way too. Now I need a much softer brush, so I'm going to turn down the hardness, and then we turn down the opacity, and now I can just paint inside here, and so maybe that was too much. We can probably go in here and so Exactly, peat bog. Yep. That's that's why I want to only keep the some parts that were that were not particularly useful. So yeah. So but I want to sometimes I want to kind of overemphasize it a little bit that there were a house there. So I'm kind of this is still an experiment because I haven't. Oops, that was not what I was out of. It's the eraser. We should undo eraser. Come on, there we go. That was the one I was after. Because I want to overemphasize a little bit of the that there were a ruin. So I'm going to keep that much, I think. For now, we'll see. And I'm also going to put in here and kind of add. That's too much. Hang on a second, we can do this and just remove. There we go. It's not supposed to be the most beautiful picture. This is or image. This is supposed to be. It's a working thing, so it needs to work well in the game, so to speak. That's the idea. And this building here is originally a farm, I think. So I'm going to see if we can remove most of it as well. So I'm going to put up the, and then we can just say that most of this building is gone here and just, and then keep the other small building here, and let's say that was kind of not worthy of recovering it. Now I'm going to add some shading. Just mark the places as inside. Okay. Let's see. We have a couple of buildings. That is the guy that repairs the boat and stuff. So I'm going to make ruins of most of these buildings, but not all of them. I'm going to keep that one, I think, and then ruin these three. The other, so that I think will be. They've probably been destroyed anything from 20 years to 2-3 years, something like that. The first one will probably destroyed during the war, burned down and stuff like that. The other ones have probably been demolished, stealing, like you said, stealing building materials, lack of maintenance, no one taking care of it, etc. So it's been that we need more opacity, and we need to have a bit more hardness here. I think that could work. So I'm just gonna keep everything. It can just be one wall at the end, and then I'm going to go in here and reduce the opacity to 10% and just paint in the foundation where the building was sitting before here. There we go. Hi Asher, welcome. I'm working on Marion Bridge Village. I'm ruining buildings at the moment, so buildings that used to be there before the war. Now this is post-war, so I need to demolish 2/3 of the village, roughly, or something like that. So most of the fancy buildings are going to be destroyed here. So I'm going to take, instead of going back and forth with the various buildings, I'm going to ruin all the buildings first, and then I can paint in the foundations afterwards, so to speak. So I can just dig some holes and say that this building was a little bit more of it could still be there, and this building can just be a memory here, basically. That one, maybe we should keep that one. this one we can ruin like that, and then we can ruin this one as well. We can ruin this one and this one, and I'll ruin this one too. Let's see how many. I probably only need 2, so let's keep another one. There we go, something like that. Now we can see. I'm going to reduce the opacity and then go in and just paint in a little bit of foundation still here, so to speak, so that they are a bit darker inside. This doesn't need to be photographically perfect, it just needs to, it's a map and not an aerial photography, so I just want to convey the information and be able to use it for outdoor combat, so to speak, for encounters and stuff, and wandering around the village with characters. And the resolution of this is 10 pixels for every 5 feet, so it is something you can use fairly well for combat and moving about the village and do all the adventuring day-to-day activities and stuff. And this building here is a large building, and it's kind of half derelict, and they kept it up because the purpose of this one is to be a large shelter. So it's like a fairly large empty barn that they used, because most of the people that actually lived here back in the day didn't have, they were herders. So when it got really cold and desperate weather, or when there was enough wolves and other threats, they had this building so they can actually take cover and put some of their sheep and cattle and stuff in here for a few hours or a day or half a day or overnight or something like that. So they had this building, and it was also a building that can be used up when they needed to shear their sheep, or when they slaughtered some of their animals and stuff like that. They can also use it for that. So it's one of these kind of general purpose buildings that was built, and so they kept it even if it's only half useful, but I think they can still use it as a shelter for horses occasionally and stuff like that. So that's why they didn't demolish it completely. And this building here was the actual Lord Merin's house, and Lord sounds kind of yeah, fortified barn. Yep. So and this house was Lord Merin's house, and that was the representative of the Baron, because this was the barony of Axport back in the day, and now it's again a different type of barony of Axport in my campaign. But back in Shieldland days, this was part of the barony of Axport. So this village was was part under in the barony, and the baron had a representative, a lord, that he issued with like a small mayor, but this was not a city or anything, so he just had a title of lord, and he was just a baron's overseer or something like that. And his only perk was that he got to live in that house for free, and then he had to have some cows or pigs or whatever to support himself, but that was his. And then he was supposed to keep an eye on things and carry out the baron's business, so that was his perk. So he lived in that. Hi Jay, welcome. Yep, so I'm working on my Merin Bridge, so it's a bit of game prep. I'm going to have a session just after this stream. I'm going to have a first session where we're going to play in this little settlement using this map. So and this house on the side here, I thought was originally a little guest house, or like a tavern or something, that where travelers could come in and have a drink, and they could stay overnight and stuff like that. He's not a fancy big inn or any. It was just someone's farmhouse who kind of had a little bit of a little guests on the side and stuff. And then and so both these houses here could serve as that. So those were villagers who kind of had some carried some extra, had like a spare room, and because it wasn't that much traffic. This was kind of a secondary road at best. So it was not it's not one of the major thoroughfares, but it was still kind of important. One of the few places that you can actually go north and south to Delard, so to speak. And there's hills to the west and a lot of rivers and stuff. But the main to cross on the in the eastern side. So there were some travelers. So that was kidding, but and also it's only a few miles away from the big town Dillard, so most travelers actually passed by. But occasionally there were people that, with bad weather or something, wanted to stay overnight and just wanted to have some refreshment. So that's when they had these couple of houses here. And then there were people who carried out various other things. Maybe someone they maybe, yeah, these were people that were probably both farmers and probably were a little bit of craftsmen of some sort. Maybe they repaired shoes or could do some blacksmithing or something like that as well. So this was definitely not a big place. It was just the main reason was just to tend to the bridge. That was the main reason that this place was existed, and to ferry some logs up and down the little river here. So let's ruin, I think we ruined these two houses as well, just to get the even out, because there's not that many people after the war and stuff. So I'm going to ruin these as well here. So lower the opacity a bit here and paint in a little bit of, so we kind of mark them out. Okay, let's see here. I think we have, okay, now we have this side as well. Let's keep the two huts and then ruin that one. I think that's the way I want to go here. Okay. There we go. Yeah, I think that will do it. So now I wonder what to do for the rest of 1.5 hours. No, we have more. I want to look over the big map and see there's a logging camp and there's a bunch of other stuff to be added. So here is the big map. So I'm going to keep the buildings here just as they are and then use the detail map for explanation, so to speak. But now I'm going to look into to add over here, to add a little logging camp. And there was a trail that people who just walk there can walk that way, and then they can put barges and stuff in here. So the reason they chose this place is it was the easiest to access the river in this end, and there's also plenty of or used to be at least plenty of trees up in the hills here where they can basically drag them downhill all the way down to the river. So it makes it a lot easier. When you log, you don't want to hold you can use a horse to drag, or an oxen, but usually a horse, to simply drag the logs down into the river and then tie them together to form a barge and then just push them downstream. I think that's the way they used to do logging back in the day. So I think that works in a fantasy world too. So I'm going to create a few huts here. So let's see here. We have buildings. There we have. I'm just gonna see if we have. There we go. Yep, we have buildings there. So now I'm going to use the pencil here and use the pencil and use the white and the pencil tool and create a few huts. And remember, now we have the porta potty scale, so each pixel is 5 feet rather than then the other scale when we have 10 pixels per 5 feet. So now I'm just going to create a few little huts here at the end of the river here. And I think the reason they cluster together is both for defensive purposes, and it's more fun to live closer to others, and also convenience because they live not exactly down at the river, because the river might flood in different parts of the year and stuff, so they probably tend to gather them a little bit up, but close by, so they can actually live close to both up the hills and then down to the river. And this was they had a few little huts and stuff, and who supported the loggers, where they could eat and drink and maybe sleep close by and so on, and someone who can repair their clothes and tools and stuff like that when they were working, because I can imagine during summer times and stuff they probably could work here for weeks on end. And so it was probably not something that was settled all year round, but something that was settled parts of the year, like from spring to fall or something like that. So there we go. Now we might want to expand the roads a little bit around the buildings, because the buildings were probably situated, I'm going to, on the road rather than, so we're going to see here, I have a trails, there we go, and I'm going to make white, and let's see here. Yeah, that works. So now we have the trail layer here, so I'm going to just add a little bit of trail around the buildings here. Oh, thank you, BR. Yeah, I think this is really important. So this is the kind of reasoning I always do to myself when I make maps. Like this is to, I'm going to remove some of it here. Yeah, so I always want to, it should make sense, so to speak, from its own purpose and perspective. So we might have demons and dragons and magic and whatnot, but even the landscape should make sense from its own perspective. So here we have a little logging camp. So let's see if there's any more settlements and stuff we should have. And the distance to that logging camp down to Meyer Bridge is about 2 miles. Probably 2.5 miles. So let's see if we can identify. There's some areas up here, but I don't think that the soil up here, because this is kind of hilly and probably not particularly suitable for agriculture. So this will be some stony stuff. So this is where the people from town will send up their goats and cows and whatever to go grazing. But here is a leftover from a bridge, because this is a little bit of a flatter area and they have a stream going past. So this is an area where a few could actually have lived a little bit, so to speak. So because the problem with river here is that the river, there is not much access to it. These are steep slope into, so the river goes in a valley that kind of floods and stuff, so it's probably not that good to live in it, so to speak. So people probably lived up, but since this is a trail going back and forth, you probably have a little bit of traffic and stuff, so there might be a few mouths to feed, and they might also have, and I simply assume this is one of the flattest area, and it's just a little bit of a valley, so it's probably fairly fertile here, and they have some water going through. So I'm going to add a few buildings in here, as so we have like a little thorpe or something here where we had a few buildings where people can actually live, and it's a fairly defensible area, so to speak. If we go and look around, you can tell that you have a civilization. Might look like far away, but it's not that far. You have town of Dellard, you have this village here, you have Orona and stuff, so, and then you have the hills, and these are kind of a barrier, so I don't think there's too much. A little bit of wildlife maybe, but not that many invading armies that and thugs and whatnot that often. And it's also people walking past and forth. So I'm going to take a liberty and add a few buildings and stuff along here, along the trail, so we can add a couple of buildings here. One a little bit bigger, and these will be small kind of people that had a few goats and pigs and maybe a cow or something like that. And they might also be people that had tended to the horses and stuff that they used in the logging operations and stuff. And some of the loggers might live here instead of living somewhere else. So we have a little bit of a village here. So let's gather them together. And they had some fields where they can grow stuff. And now we see that some of these buildings are blue and stuff. So I'm going to go in here and just get the blue colors away from the roofs. And so now we have some, and simply say that most of them probably have like wooden roofs or thatched roofs or something like that for it. So that is another little place to name and to put in the books. Okay, and then I have, and most of these buildings are probably now ruined after they got ruined at the war, during the war, because then maybe a few refugees might hold out and stuff. So it's kind of, it's probably deserted on the most part. Here are another few buildings here, and since there is a road up and down, the civilization is fairly close, and these places here are probably fairly fertile. So there are a few farmers that hang out here that can both farm, they have some trees, and they also have access to the river, so they can have a little boat and go out and fish and stuff. And so they actually can probably have a fairly good living, so to speak. It's a little bit exposed because they're not defended behind a wall or anything like that, but some farmers might be brave and and live in a condition like that. And back in Shieldland's days, this area here was probably not that bad to live in, so to speak. So it's not that bad, so to speak. So that's why they some people actually prefer to live out there. They'll probably have lower taxes and stuff like that. You can do a little bit more as you wish, so to speak. And then they could produce whatever, like goat milk and hides and a little bit of food. Maybe they had bees, so they can produce honey or whatever, and then they could sell that in town, like once a week or once a month or something like that, and earn some extra money. And there are more little settlements around here. So we have a settlement here on the way, and here are more, but we should probably have a few more. I visioned that there was some here, and we should probably have some and add a trail going through here as well, because back in the day this was probably very good territory to live, probably very fertile. It flooded occasionally, I guess, so people probably lived a little bit on stilts or built like a foundation 10 feet up or something like that. But I'm going to put in a few buildings that can now be ruined, but they used to be here, and that's why I painted in. These are like old fields here, so I'm going to add a couple of buildings here. Hang on a second, that I need to switch it to white, and then I'm going to, am I on the right? No, stupid me, I'm on the, I need to undo pencil twice and then go to the mask layer. There we go. And now I can paint in. Yep. So you need to make sure you paint on the right layer on the mask instead of the actual layer. That's difficult, important. So I'm going to paint in a few buildings here. So here we have another little village here, and first we might need to go and look at we have the road here. And we have trails. And then just see, yeah, that would work. So now we need to figure out which way. I'm tempted to just make a trail here and cross, but that looks like it's a fair bit of river and trail here. So well, yeah, the trees, yeah, it's each of these pixels. If I go really close, each pixel here is 5 feet. But this area here was probably forest. If we go back some thousands of years before it was kind of settled by a large population, this was depending on climate. So, but I have it in my campaign that this was some 3, 5, 6,000 years ago. This was on the next to the when Flanies had an ice age, or Earth had an ice age. So this was then the boreal forest up fairly close to the ice sheet. So then this was boreal forest, and then as climate warmed up, it became more like temperate forest. But then you had it dried out over the several thousand years, and it got settled by lots of humans from the Flans, and then Iridians and others came and settled, and they chopped up. So what is left of forests are usually in areas that are either wet, like the edges of rivers and stuff, or areas that are far away enough that it becomes difficult or inconvenient to chop it down, like in middle of bogs and up in the hills. That's where you have the original old forests are still present up in the hills, and some of these areas that are far away enough that it's kind of too difficult to go and chop down the stuff. So most of these areas are turned into grazing, or turned in or too dry, and once you chop down the trees, they will not grow back again unless humans disappear, and or at least humans and other similar creatures, when they stop settling it, and then it might revert back to more. So when you don't have cattle and there's not enough wildlife to graze it. Therefore, so it's kind of both natural causes and other pressures from civilization that have turned this area into mainly open grassland. So that's my take on it. But I simply follow the description of the countries, and then I try to fill it in. I try to adjust the geography to fit the stories. That's the important bit. When you have a game setting, I don't want to upset and change things. I just want to use geography to actually to facilitate the stories we know. So I'm not going to use, because this probably floods often back and forth. And these people that lived here are, instead of having to rebuild and use the flooded road, they probably started using a trail that goes around here that is not flooded that often. So I'm going to make a little trail here for the, oh, you're welcome, BR. Yep. So I'm going to make a trail going in here. And then we can see if we can have some more little buildings and stuff on the way here. And like in my campaign that is set in 598, 599, most of these buildings are now ruined and stuff, and abandoned or burnt down even and stuff. But Dillard is starting to come back. And Dillard in my campaign was actually not that torn by war, because most people fled from it. So Ayus could actually maybe that was a little bit too much. I'm going to go down to 1 after all. So Ayus could actually conquer the town intact, so he didn't have to lay siege to it or anything, because people fled in boats and also along the shoreline, so to speak. So therefore the 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 people fled rather than put up a fight. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go with the just through the trees here. And this river is so minuscule that you can just, it's like a small creek that you can just go across on the little ford here. So now I'm going to continue with the trail along here. I'm trying to stay here on top of the highest peaks here, or the ridge, and then we go with the road in there. And now we can actually kind of make a little square here like that, and then we can actually make a little trail going here as well, because this area here is good for several reasons, because it's probably very fertile. You have access to the river, and it's also fairly defensible, because it's kind of, you can see people come in, and you can kind of, the river was probably more of a barrier than just being out in the on in the middle of a grassy plain, so to speak. So this was probably good, and you have access to both trees, water, and stuff like that, and good lands. And I can also imagine that these were probably tenant farmers that didn't own their land, so they're probably just there to simply cultivate it and grow things, and tend to crops and cattle for rich people in town. So it was actually townsfolks and the rich that owned these lands and stuff, and these people just lived on them and farmed them and stuff, and for a little share of the crops or something like that. That was the, could be common, and they might not even live there all year round, so we'll see. Yeah. So now I'm going to make a few little houses here too. And I think that in the real world, in medieval times and so on, people lived close by. And I think in a fantasy world where you can have everything from hellcats to undead haunting and doing all sorts of stuff, I can see that the houses were even closer. So you get a little bit of defense, so you know that if something bad comes and try and to hunt you at night, then you have your neighbors close by. So I'm going to just make some little roads among the buildings like that. There we go. Now we've added a little bit more here, and the same thing goes here. That's something I left. We need to do the same thing here, because we have on the eastern side here, on the western side we have same thing, and here I see a lot of people that put up tents. These are refugees from other parts of the Shieldlands that have settled here, because it's very recently, because now it's become a buffer state that is actually run not by Iusians, but they are kind of borderline Iusians. So Ius have actually rented this out to a guy called Ammon Seren that runs a merchant house in Greyhawk, and he's leased the title of Baron, and he rules these lands under the kind of and he still has to have at least nominal service to Ius, and he has to pay Ius, but then he can, as long as he pays Ius, he can pretty much do whatever he wants, almost whatever he wants. So Ius is interested in the money, and he's also a way to get trade with the rest of the world. So he wants to see, and that's why a lot of people have fled in here, because it's a place where it's a harsh, tough place to live still, but at least you're not being tortured to death by for various minuscule things. So it's a little bit better than it used to be in my campaign. So now we can go here and create a few like little farmsteads and stuff around here, because this is all cultivated, and either it's they use to grow things or they use it for grazing, because this is probably very fertile. On top of here gets flooded at times, so it was probably good lands for agriculture. So now it's time to put some buildings and stuff here, and this is fairly close to town, so you don't need to, and it's on this island here, and it's inside, but they probably had guards along the bridges and stuff, so this is still fairly defensible and stuff, so you don't need to cluster together that much, so to speak. So but it's kind of convenient to stay close to the road here, so I can imagine that most of them actually were there. So we have a little cluster there, then we can put a couple of buildings here. That one we put that ended up in the middle of the road, so let's get rid of it there. Then we put it on the side there instead. We add a few more here, Add one there. And then we can add a couple here too. There we go. And then we can add a couple here. They can be people that it's always good to be the first greeting strangers and stuff. So, and then we can have a couple out here on this little island here too. There we go. And now we have a few more over here, are more lands and stuff, so we can have a couple of more buildings here. We can kind of ganged up together here. There we go. Let's see here. Okay, let's zoom out. Let's save here before so I don't lose what I've done here. Okay. So this is the way I reason when I do maps at this scale or at any scale. You have to, I always try to figure out things, and first it's more kind of geology, basic geography, biomes like climates and stuff like that. And now I'm into the civilization bits, meaning where do people live, and how do you travel, and roads and stuff like that. So, and then these places will get names and histories and stuff. So, and some of them I would just neglect until I need it for my campaign. And then we have, and this east here is this is the road towards Axport. So this road going east. So and it's actually split up into two here. So it's because this is on top of the ridge. So this is the road to Axport. So this was fairly well trafficked. So I can definitely see that some people live in some of these areas, or at least used to, because there are some old fields and stuff. The reason I haven't marked them out that much is that they haven't been cultivated in like 20 years. So since IUCN invasion, they've been kind of neglected, or people got killed or fled who used to tend to them. But now for a few years things are starting to change, and people are actually starting to come back here. So that means that I need to put some houses in here, and then I can decide from case to case whether they should be ruins or whether they should be habitable and people actually living in them. That's something I will decide when I move into more kind of adventure making and prep for each session, because sooner or later the characters will come here and go towards Axport. We'll see. Since I run very sandboxy games, I'm not really sure where the characters will go. So the players might decide to, no, we want to go in some other direction. So that's why I have to prep these areas and expand maps and put details in almost every direction. Okay, it takes a while. This is a large file thanks to all the layers and stuff here. And then I can reduce the complexity a little bit, but I want to have it. It's kind of convenient to have all the different textures. If I want to remove some of these fields, I want to add fields, etc. And it's also good to have a lot of the layers if I want to convert it into winter maps and stuff, because then I can separate out trees, I can separate bogs, fields and stuff like that for different. So for if I want to introduce a spell like a demonic invasion or some sort of plague or something that affects how a blight or something like that, I can it's good to have them separated a bit. The problem is that it takes a lot of disk space, and it also takes a lot of time to save. So I need a faster SSD on my computer. Okay, yeah, we'll see. It usually takes a long time in the middle and then hopefully will speed up at the end. I can show a little bit what I do with the maps once I'm done. I put them in world anvil like this. So I have my Meyer hawk. So here I have some stories, Lord Merrin's house. I have some stories about it, and here we have Jochel the boat maker and his story, and he moved in. I'm actually going to move that over to that needs to go to the other. I'm going to move that over to this house because I ruined that one, so I'm going to have him live in this house instead. So I put some of the backstories and stuff in here. So this is the village map that is 10 pixels per 5 feet. Okay, so now we can continue here again and look at so here we have the main road over here. So let's have a little village along here. I think would be good. Or maybe, yeah, I think over here, because one of the things is that they probably chopped down most of the trees around where they live. So I'm going to create. I have some village, a little bit of some houses here. Like that. And the reason is that you can both have a little bit of a business selling refreshments or whatever to travelers and help them, and you're also fairly close, so you can produce things like agriculture, food stuff, or whatever it is, and you can go and sell it in town. So that's the main reason. So these people probably kept goats and pigs and chickens or whatever it was, and had things and grew things a little bit and hunted maybe as well, and then sold the excess produce at the market. So I'm going to have some houses there, some buildings, and we can actually make a couple of buildings here too. They are probably ruined now, but before the war this was probably not a bad place to live, because you could probably make a fairly good living here, and it was a fairly civilized area, and you had the Nurdiv close by here. So this was that land in between, along the and along between the Sandstin River and the Nurdiv. And also this was the main road going east and west north of Nurdiv. So this was probably well traveled for hundreds of years from the founding of the Great Kingdom and into modern times. But then it probably reduced a bit even early on when the Bandit Kingdom took over the eastern part, and when the Great Kingdom started to fall apart, and Foriondi and Shuldans and stuff became independent and not part of the Great Kingdom anymore, then this area was probably had more people living locally, but didn't have that many long distance travelers. So that was probably a little bit of a change that happened gradually. Okay, then we have some areas up here, just like on the western side of the river. The eastern side of the river also, I'm sure, has some good areas for agriculture and stuff. That's why I added all these roads in here, and I think I've added, no, I haven't added the buildings yet, but I see this area here is kind of cool. You have a natural little harbor. You can have your little boat. You can go in and out and go fishing, and you can have it around. So this area here, I'm definitely going to make a tiny little village with a few houses here and add it in. And they kept a few a few trees and stuff around here too, so can add the buildings there. Can add a few buildings here, so we can make this like a real, there we go. And we can even have an inn or something over here, because that might be a little bit of river traffic coming in too. And then also they can also sell stuff at the town. This is an area that wouldn't have any through traffic on foot or horse, but then they have the river instead to fall back on as well. So go in here and add some more. There we go. Little bit of roads between the buildings. And I can even add a little boardwalk or something to tie the boats at. So we add a little boardwalk sticking out there. We can even add another one there. So there we go. We added a few boats and stuff that we can place where they can tie their little boats into. And then we have another area here that I think it's flat floodplain near the river. So here is probably another place where you can have a good spot for agriculture. So I'm going to add a few farmsteads here and here. Add a couple of them here. And then we can add here and add a few in at the end here. Make some of them smaller and some of them a little bit bigger. There we go. And then we have something that looks like I put in old, so we can kind of have a few buildings here too. There we go. Then we should. No, I have to find the right keys here. I'm pressing the Windows button. So there we go. Then we can add a couple of houses here. And along here I can add a couple, and at the end here I'll add so. Seems a bit like this could be a place where you can have a little bit of a couple of houses here, just to tend to the traffic going back and forth. And here I'm going to add something that is not a house, but I'm going to add a little dot, because that's probably a milestone sitting there, something sticking up telling you where to go. And then we have here, I imagine that here is another spot, because this is higher ground here on the right hand side. Up here is higher ground, and then this is kind of a flat fertile plain here. So and you have some water and access to water and stuff, so so the creek. So I'm going to add a little village in between that trail and here. I think is a good spot. So I'm going to add a little village here. Because you have water, you have good lands, and town is not that far away. So I'm going to add a few here. Let's say that that is a little mill there next to the stream. So that stream is hopefully big enough to have a mill in, but we can assume that it's big enough. So I'm going to make it like that. That's a little mill house over there. Let's do some road works to make this go in here too. So we make a little road go in here, and we make a little there, and then we have like a village square common area in the middle, and then we add a little bit extra going out there. So there we go. Then we have a little village. And I think back in, if you take medieval England, France, or Germany and stuff, there were probably a village every mile or two, sometimes every half mile. So I hope it's a happy. They were probably not happy during the IUCN occupation, but now there might be a few happy souls that have settled there again. So, but I think most of it was abandoned during the occupation, but now it's probably coming back. So most of it is ruined, but it might be a chance. We'll see what the future might hold, so to speak. So, but it might be a little bit of hope in the future. So, but back in the day during the Shieldlands era and before, that was probably a fairly okay place. I think it's like growing up in rural Wisconsin or Iowa or something like that. So in the real world, or like a little town outside of, or village outside of the town. I grew up in something equivalent of half Dellard sites in Sweden. So I grew up in a small town well, maybe something like that in western Sweden. So and we had small villages that was outside of town, so to speak. We had several of them. So I can that some of them probably had medieval roots too. Okay, so now we have in between, we could probably have a few houses. Here is an interesting stop. I put some houses there because next, but here is a stop. There's people coming that way and here. So I think this probably not anymore, but back in the day, I bet that this was an area where you could have a few, and there's some. This is good land, so to speak. You have both water, people, and you have arable land. So that is probably a reason for a few people to gang up and live here. So now I'm going to just paint the road a little bit wider here. There we go. So now I have a little dog here who wants to up in the bed. Here you go. Yeah, you have to feed your familiar some treats, so she's happy. Okay, now we're back to mapping again here. Okay, now we can. I've looked at. We have here. I think I placed. Here is a little trail going around, and I put these because there's some houses down here, and because these areas here are also probably good property to have because you have beach property, and beaches had their own kind of, you could scour the beaches for food stuff, you can and all sorts of stuff. This is not salt water. It's kind of brackish fresh water in the lake, but I bet that some people wanted to live there. There were probably good grazing and so on. But I'm going to skip it for now. I think we don't need more build, but we have a few more buildings here maybe. Now I'm kind of torn a bit. Here we have the village of Orona here, and it's a defensible peninsula sticking up around the river, so this is kind of a good. They have a couple of guard towers in this end, a little bit of a wooden wall here, and then they have the bridge in the other end, and they have a little port here, and a bunch of houses and some fields and houses spread out here on this peninsula. So that's a good spot, I think, to live. That's why I added them there. So people have probably clustered in here rather than spreading out everywhere. And that's also low laying country, so to speak. Okay, so let's go up here and go north a bit. I need to do the next bit here is in the making. The next both the next west, east and north is in the making, so I haven't done them yet. But my first step over here we have the next little village. So we have from Meyer, I think I called this one Kevet. I'm not sure yet, but I think it was called Kevet. So here is Meyer, and then it's about 1.5 miles to the next one here. And the reason they're here is simply it's a couple of miles along the river, and they have a good little access to the river and some good lands to cultivate and graze, or use grazing for sheep and cattle and stuff. So maybe I can add a couple of ruined houses along here too, because it's kind of good. We can add a few in here, and just I will simply assume that these are now ruined, but they were back in the day. These were actually good places to live. There we go. And now add a little bit of more road and stuff so you can see them better, and people tend to trample all over the place where they live. So there we go. And that also, it's kind of cultural a little bit how you have your buildings. So I try to, these are what I simply assume most of these are Oridian settlements, so to speak. They're made and were founded during the Great Kingdom expansion, and while this was held by the Oridian of Great Kingdom, so I think they kind of had fairly advanced agriculture and stuff, so they were not clustered in, they didn't live in long houses or stuff like that, so they had small little houses and had backyards where they could have their own fruit trees and grow vegetables and stuff like that, and they have some chickens and cattle and sheep and goats and stuff. And since these are open grazing country, I think a lot of people here probably had their own goats, sheep, cattle and stuff like that to graze. So this is probably not the best lands to grow crops. Okay to grow crops, but probably very good lands for grazing. But along the river here, you probably have the best when it comes to grow crops. As soon as you get away from the river and this becomes stonier and higher grounds and drier and stuff, I don't think it's particularly fertile. And some of the bogs here are definitely not fertile. So it's the floodplains, the flat floodplains that kind of gets washed over by flood water that brings nutrients and stuff. But if you have a druid, then you can probably make a good living almost anywhere. So I'm sure that there was some flan culture behind the scenes, so to speak, a bit like Hamlet's. Okay, so that is the probably as much as I want to do on this. So I'm probably going to go in and do some splat map painting instead, because otherwise I would just put too many buildings in here, and I don't think I need to have more buildings right now. So I'm going to save again. Yes, BR. Yeah, I would definitely have little clusters of huts for goat herders and stuff. So up in when you get away, but not this close to town. Then I think they will probably, where you have good lands to grow crops and stuff. That's where you form village. But if you get a few miles away, I would assume that they, instead of having a few, they probably built more a permanent structure. I could say that they could have a little keep or something like that every 10 miles or so. There will be a keep, or with a fenced in, where you had an area that had like a stone wall around it or something, where you can take your sheep and cattle and stuff, and you can actually put them behind a stone wall, and there will be a stone fortified building or of some sort where you can seek refuge, a bit like I had in Meyer there, but on a little bit bigger scale. So I think they had stuff like that where you can take shelter, both if there were harsh winters at times when the weather got really harsh, and also if there were wolves or enemies around and stuff. And they can often be manned, I think, by Shieldland soldiers and stuff who simply, and they could move soldiers and knights from between these fortifications, and some of them probably had a village or some houses around it as well. So there was someone there who could tend to various things, and who could offer food and stuff like that. And someone, maybe they in bigger places, they might have someone who could be a blacksmith, or someone who can do some leather work, or something like that too. But I assume that here and there they probably had these kind of shelter keeps or something that people probably didn't live in permanently, but they were there to protect and make sure that they can tend, and also to make sure that thugs didn't go around the land, so to speak. So they could defend and overview areas, probably on high points. So you can, if you were on the top of the keep, you could see for miles around and keep an eye on things. That is something I want to dig into. Thank you, Rasneb. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you so much. Yep, and I can spill the beans now that it's the Hepmona land is coming. Yep, I gave a little tiny sneak peek to my top patrons yesterday. They got a little sneak peek at Hepmona land. So yep, Hepmona land is coming in the same style as the current Flanese maps. Not this detailed, but it's coming in the same style as the my current Flanese map. Okay, so let's just take a look at Merin Bridge and see. I think I'm done with this too here. So yep. So there will be some sneak peeks down in hopefully by the end of November. There will be sneak peeks for everyone, and then it will come out by the end of the year. So it will be we'll see how I will split it up, but it will definitely be part of the atlas, but then it might be a separate map, and I will not expand the current Flanese map further. I think it will be, I will split it up. We'll see how it will be split up, but I'm working on it, so it's coming. Now I'm going to remove that one, and then we can do open here, and I'm going to work on Shieldlands 2, and we have splat map. So we have Oh, cool. Awesome, Pete Bog. That sounds fun. Yep. Yep. So it's coming. And I'm not going to show any today. I'm going to show my patrons more in detail first, and then it will be for everybody. But there is a little tiny thumbnail here and here. So if you take a peek, you can see it in a few little detail in a tiny um, a little thumbnail there. So yeah. I'm sorry it takes so long to open these files. They are huge. And it also takes a little bit longer while I'm streaming, because that way it's another it puts some extra strain on the computer. Oh, cool, Rasnap. That sounds fun. Yep, travel to the Pirate Isles. Yep, and the Pirate Isles will give an overview, just like the Isle of Dread will have an overview, so they will be there too. So the whole ocean there will be covered basically, and not the southern part, because there is part of what some would call Zindia and stuff. That will not be covered this time. But they will. So Hebonaland will be covered, and all the islands and stuff will be covered this time. So I'm expanding bit by bit, but it's the biggest expanse. I've never expanded this much in 20 years since I claimed the original Flanies area, and now I'm making the first major expansion of the map in 20 years. Oh, and this takes forever. I'm sorry about this. It's kind of it's boring. Must be extra boring to just see all the progress bars going like this. That's crazy. But what this is the oh, now we're starting to speed up a little bit here. This is the area west of the area we were just looking at, and this is the splat map. So I'm actually telling World Machine what type of terrain will go where, so to speak. So this is the Thank you, Pete Bog. You're too nice. You're way too nice. I'm actually going to kill off this and close this while I'm at it, because thank you, BR. Yep. So I'm going to kill off this so we can actually speed up a little bit by having a little bit less open in RAM, because this computer has 64 GB of RAM, and right now I think it's not enough. Yep. Yep, so now it will be a bit less interesting map to look at in a way. So what I will do now is use basic colors to get the rivers in the right spots, and tell what should be bogs, what should be lakes, etc. So it's I'm using it to mask and tell information when I then put into World Machine. So I've done the basic terrain in World Machine, and now I'm going to use the splat map for texturing and to adjust certain things and stuff in World Machine. So it's a back and forth. First you do basic terrain modeling in World Machine, and then you create a basic splat map, and then you go in and adjust the splat map. That's what we're going to do now. And then you take the adjusted splat map back into World Machine, and then or Gaia, because I will start using both in the future. And then you use the colors here as masks for difference, so you can tell what's supposed to be grassland, what is going to be forests, and then also the difference between evergreen forest, like pines and spruces and stuff, versus deciduous leafy trees and stuff like that. So, and then you have the difference, what's going to be a stream, what's going to be a lake, what is going to be a bog, and swamps and stuff. That's what I'm doing in the splat map area, because that way you can use the splat map both to generate textures in World Machine, and you can also use it for game engines, for GIS maps, and a whole bunch of stuff. Hopefully it can be done within 20 years. Yes, I definitely hope so. And the good thing is that I'm getting better at this, meaning I'm faster, and also the computers are getting better and software is getting better. Yeah, this is 16 by 16,000 pixels, and the file size are probably in around 30 gigabytes or something like that in file size. So this is 16,000. This is a 16K map. It's 16,384 by 16,384 pixels. Yeah, so I'm using a fairly. This is a fairly capable. It's a seventh gener. It's 5 years old, so it's a seventh generation Core. It's a Core i9 that is 5 years old, or Core i7, I think, that is 5 years old. But I have a new graphics card, so I have a T3080 or 3080 Ti, NVIDIA 3080 Ti in it. So actually, the graphics is now good, and 32 bits of or 64 gigabytes of RAM. I have a 3D computer that has 128 gigabytes of RAM that I use for mainly for 3D work. But that one, I had a hard drive failure, so it's syncing up stuff still. So I had to replace a couple of hard drives in it, so the storage got screwed up. So okay, so here we have. So this area is actually the western edge of the map we saw before. Is toward, it's the east of here, so to speak. So now we're west. So this is the Veng River that goes out into from the Wistel Lake here and out into the Nurdöv. So this is the Nurdöv, and this is one of the major rivers. So this is like the Volga, the Rhine, or the Mississippi in scale, so to speak. And it also goes gradually from lake into river. So this is this is kind of a in between lake and river, so to speak. So that's why there's a lot of islands, and this will be converted into wetlands. So there will be a lot of marshlands, and there's like areas here where you have sandbanks and all sorts of stuff. And these white lines, that's simply where World Machine have told me that there can be rivers here. So, and they continue everywhere, so to speak, because it's just a mask that is on top of things here, so you can turn that on and off. So I'm using that in order to create the different areas for where rivers can be. So I was actually I'm using a different colors for rivers that I've done add manually, so to speak, and then it's the blue colors of lake color. And then what I've done is that here is a river that I've manually grown in, and this is, so all the blue areas here are flat, and they could either be lake, bog, marshland, or grassland. And then I've added in manually the whole river going up here. So now we need to start thinking the other areas in here, so to speak. So we need to have rivers flowing into this river. So from these areas here, so I converted these lakes, and these are flat areas that used to be lakes, and then they were turned gradually into bogs or swampland, and then there are rivers flowing through them. So we need to start adding these kind of rivers that flow through them. So I'm going to start doing that down here. So I've actually, the last time I worked on it, I've added these kind of small creeks going here between. These are small lakes in the crack. And hang on a second, do I have, yeah, I have the shading. So this is fairly flat. There's a little bit of shading here and there. Here you can see the shading. So there's some hills sticking up here, but otherwise it's fairly flat. So let's go in here and see what we can do. So I've added this greenish kind of color here is marshland, so to speak. So this is swampy areas. And then, so let's see, I was here working here. So we have these areas here, and then these are old riverbeds that have kind of disappeared, so to speak, and lost their when the but that one should probably have a river. So let's start with that one. So now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a pencil tool and check that I have. We can probably start with 1 pixel and check I have 100%, and then go in here and then just start painting in rivers here. And these will be these small creeks that we saw on the other map, so to speak. So when I render the texture in World Machine, these will be converted into these tiny little creeks. So I just follow this little, this is a small little cutout, so it's a little, and this is the last remnant. There are bogs around it that probably were marshy and lakey, and then there's only that little bit left, and some tiny little puddles here around. So I'm going to just add a little meander here, because this is all flat. When you have brown, that means that it's all flat. So I'm going to add in now. I'm going to see if I increase this to 2 pixels. So it's probably too much. We can keep 2, so we can keep a little bit of a lake in the middle here, like that. We can keep like that, a lake there, and then we go back to 1 again in here in this little, because it's dug out a little tiny little river valley there. And then we can probably add a little bit of a lake here too. Can keep 2 tiny little islands in there, and then we can go in here and that's too much with 3. I think it's too much, so I'm going to keep 2 here. Yes, definitely, Rasnab. Oxbow lakes in with that bigger river that meanders through that flat river valley. Yes, exactly. There will be lots of oxbow lakes and little leftover lakes and stuff like that, because the river kind of, like, you know, it changes, it's meandering, and so it wanders across the landscape, and then it leaves a lot of leftover oxbow lakes and stuff. So definitely, first I need to so the step 1 is to establish the actual current flow of the river, and then I need to have these auxiliary river coming in, and then when I have those 2 things, that's when I start adding the previous flows and the oxbows lake and stuff. When I have the current situation dialed in, that's when I add the old stuff, so to speak, and start thinking of where can the river historically have gone back and forth to over, so to speak. So now I can probably stop there. Okay, so there we have that little river system, and then we can work our way and check. We have, and these are interesting because there are some scrape marks and stuff. First, these are kind of artifact from World Machine. At first I was like, that doesn't look good, but then I realized that no, it can be fun, so I'm going to keep it and see what it looks like in final render when I have these kind of go back and forth. And maybe they could be remnant of people kind of used this area to extract peat back in the day. So someone might have used chips and came here and simply started taking peat, or it's just a natural or magical or whatever. So I'm going to keep it for now, and then see if it doesn't look bad, I'll paint it over in another splat map update. So because you usually have to do this iteration 3 or 4 times in order to get it done right, so to speak. So, okay, so let's work on this, because we have we have a lake up here. Yep. Peat bog, exactly. It's your, it's your type of place. Yep. So now I'm kind of curious where you got the nickname Peat bog from. That's kind of cool. I like it. It's so cool. So I'm going to go in here and start from up here, and we can have a little bit there, but I'll simply assume that these lakes are now dried out enough so they don't flow over. This one flows over. Great, hang on a second, we can go in here and see what I got. No, there's actually no slope there, so let's create a little river. This is what I can do. I can use this and have a slope mask, and if it's black there's no slope, so I can assume that this is actually flat there. So at least I don't think it varies more than necessary. So I'm going to go in here and make a little creek from here. And then through here. Yeah, BR, that's an interesting thing. I want magic and divine intervention and stuff like that to affect it, but I always want to make sure that it doesn't completely contradict geology, because I want it to be a combination, and also a lot of divine and magical interaction will probably work with the geography in one way or the other. So you will not go in and just reshape it completely, just put in like big squares or anything like that. But it will shape it and use natural forces and kind of enhance them or subdue them and stuff. And I also assume that this world, like World of Greyhawk, the basic physics is made up of elementals. So instead of atoms and stuff that we have in the real world, and quantum forces and all that, I simply assume that we have the basic four elements, and then we can have shadow stuff, and so it's D&D physics at the bottom of it, so to speak. But then, and that will affect things. So instead of having plate tectonics that works exactly like in the real world, it's more interesting to have like a fantasy version of plate tectonics, where you can have a little bit too much impact of fire, it gets volcanoes and stuff like that. That's awesome, Pete Bog. Well, yeah, and for people, yeah, that's, I think that must be both interesting and terrifying to live in a fantasy world. It was probably terrifying enough to live in old medieval times, so to speak. So it's kind of scary. Yeah. Yeah, you can add interesting stuff, and so I want to spice it up using elemental forces and magic and stuff. So, and now I want this to connect into so this river that flows past. So I'm going to go back into the base here, and then I'm just gonna steal some blue here, and then I'm just gonna extend that into here. Well, ResNap, that's one of the interesting things is don't I I want it to have affected geology, and I think it's the hell furnaces, according to some sources, was created or became full of volcanoes and stuff like that, and so I have it that it actually affected and lowered the land, so you got like a dust bowl that became hot and dry, thanks to the reign of colorless fire. So the cataclysms actually changed the country, or the geography, and that way it enhanced the magic, and it turned it really lethal, and you got this dust bowl that was dry, hot, and full of nasty dust. And now I'm going to do two here. And now I have a dog. That one's down, so I can So there we go. I have to keep an eye on the time here too, because I have to stop just before 8 o'clock because I have a game that starts just after this live session here. So then we're going to play in Meyer Bridge, but it's the first session, so it's more like setting up characters and getting fantasy grounds and stuff up and running. So I'm actually going to, well, I can keep that and see how it works. And then we go like this, and then we go through, and here it's a flat, so here we got some meandering and stuff. So I'm actually going to run. Yep. So I'm going to run a game in a first session of, it's the second party in so I have a campaign set in the same time in the same general area, and now I have we'll have two parties going through in the same area, so to speak, at the same time. So it's okay. This is actually very relaxed kind of thing, and I haven't done that much work. I did some flight simming and stuff like that earlier in the day too, so I've been lazy a little bit, and I'm actually going to be lazy tomorrow and not work that much tomorrow. So it's going to I'm this will be a lot. It will be like probably about 8 hours today with mapping, predominantly from the afternoon and evening, and tomorrow I'm going to go out and go a long walk in the morning, and then I'm going to do some flight simming in the afternoon, and then I'm going to do some mapping and stuff in the evening. So I might take the whole day off. We'll see. So I try to keep 50 or 60 hour weeks, so to speak. But the good thing is that I can do it somewhat, things like this and streams and stuff you have to do at a certain time. But the other good thing is that I can actually work whenever I feel like it, so to speak. And that's very important for when you have a job like me. When you do stuff like this full time, you have to make sure that you have a lifestyle that makes you want to work. That's the key. That is key. So it's long term. So it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So it's what I can produce per month and per year that is interesting, not what I produce per day. Some days, of course, when you have deadlines on commissions and stuff, but most days it's not important what I do that day. It's important what I do per week, and especially what I do per month and per year. So I'm not particularly effective per day, but I'm effective long term. So I'm definitely a tortoise and not a hare when I do stuff like this. So I have a slow, steady pace, so to speak, but over time it actually builds up. And I think I can compete with a lot of others that do similar stuff, so to speak. I can keep up with them at least. And it's also, that's one of the important things for inspiration, is to actually go out in nature, because when you do what I do, you want to know what the real world looks like. That's why I'd love to do things like hiking, landscape photography and stuff, so I can actually just try to understand and visually recognize how real landscape works. And so I want to know how the real world works, and that way I can simulate and start thinking of how a fantasy world where you have dragons and magic and all sorts of weird stuff, how that would work, so to speak. But to be grounded in real world knowledge is for me, it's a good starting point. Okay, so we have this one, so I just keep adding them here and keep an eye on the time here. That's not something I normally have to do that often. I can just immerse myself. Sometimes I forget to set my alarm, so people start texting me or sending me stuff and say, oh, you should be doing this or that. So I have to make sure, because I can get really into stuff like this. So that's why I often set alarms, so I can remember streams and when when to go on Lord Gazumba channel and stuff like that. So okay, so here we have this going through. You can use a mask and simply use that river as a mask, but the problem is masks tend to break down when there's only 1 or 2 pixels wide, so that's better to, it's actually easier to paint them manually when they're that thin, so to speak, or when you have thicker, when it's like 3-4 pixels, then that's when things can actually start working better, and you can actually start working on and you can use masks. Now I'm just using it for guidance and not absolute, so to speak. Now I'm up to 2 pixels, and it's also important to vary the width a little bit, because otherwise it looks computer generated, and that's important. That doesn't. Well, thank you, BR. This is I'm so afraid that these sessions will be very, very boring, so I want to try and talk to you guys and go through my thinking as much as the technique, because I think the thinking behind is as important. If you want to learn Photoshop, there are so many awesome YouTube videos and stuff that you can learn all the how Photoshop works and how Illustrator works and stuff. So what I want to show you is how I'm thinking and how I apply the tools in this case, so to speak. So in order to get this to function, you need to understand Photoshop basically, and how to do the layering and masking and stuff like that in Photoshop. So but please ask any kind of technical questions like that, and I can have a stream where we can just go into deep into technical stuff too if need be. But I think a lot of it is kind of start thinking of it from a world building cartography perspective. I think that's very important, because there's much less of that information. There's thousands of people that teach Photoshop way better than I can, but there are not that many that teaches you world building geography and slash cartography that much. There is not that many. So now I'm going to paint over this bit here. This is something I might have to go back in when I look at it in World Machine, because World Machine have a tendency sometimes and make these too straight, because these are basically big mud fields, so to speak, or floodplains that are on the border, because we are on the at the very estuary of rivers. So it's like major rivers form an estuary where they flow into the ocean, or in this case the Nirduv, that is so big that you can treat it basically like flowing out in the sea. So it forms a bit of a delta, and you have these kind of mud flats that, because the river probably is up and down when it floods in the springtime, this might be all submerged, and then during summer and drier warmer parts of the year, then, or maybe also midwinter, then these are just open dry sandbanks. And also one of the other thing is that in some areas you see lots of little rivers that meanders back and forth along these kind of muddy swamp lands next to rivers and shorelines, and that's especially in areas where you have a lot of tidal activity, because tides creates like small rivers that goes in and out twice a day. But since this is a lake, that means that there is not much tidal activity. So that's why we will not have lots of these little kind of tidal rivers and tidal pools and stuff. So that's why I don't add a lot of that. If this would have been a coastline, then I will have added a lot of that, especially if it's in a tidal area. And I think thankfully some people have looked into where tides will be in Greyhawk, so I have to look more at that and let that play a part in geography. So we have about 10 more minutes to work here, so I'm going to go in and work on the other ones here. And when I see stuff like this done in World Machine, I'm so happy because this looks very realistic to me. Very, very realistic. So here we have done that one, so now I'm going to do this one here. And it starts with a little bit of a so these are a little bit of eroded hills and some small little that sticks up, so to speak, out of the landscape, and then comes this flat area of sandy beach. So I'm going to start the river probably up, or the river is too much to call, but a tiny little creek. So this creek is probably about 5 feet wide, and now I need to, there we go. The mouse cursor when I have this tool is so minuscule, it's only a little gray dot. So it's sometimes hard to see. So there we go. So I paint this little creek going in here. Oops, now I have a doggy problem again here. Minnie's trying to get in under my desk. There we go. And she has a tendency of getting cables unplugged. and even if she's 20-year-old and she can't see and she can't hear, she knows how to get mommy's attention. And getting under my desk and start pulling in cables is a very good way of, a sure way of getting mommy's attention immediately. So there we go. So I have to save it. So sorry about that. So here we go. So back to the creek here, and now I need to move my map up a little bit here, and I can paint in a little bit more here. I can probably widen it to 10 feet, 2 pixels, and now I lost my, there we go. And add, it's a huge difference between 1 and 2 pixels. It's like 1 pixel is a half and 2 is like 3, so that seems to be something built in there. So I'm going to, and it doesn't matter if this is a little bit shaky back and forth, because it needs to have some detail here and there. So there we go. And we have 8 more minutes. We can definitely do one more here, because save is something I can do after I end the stream. We don't need to sit and look. We have looked enough at all the progress bars to last us for like 3 more streams. So let's go up here and start this one. So now there we go. And I'm going to start that one. I wish that Photoshop could handle really small masks like this good, but my experience is that it doesn't do a real good job at all when you only have 1 pixel wide or 2. It tends to either make too much of a mask, or it will not be part of the mask at all. So it's kind of, and I can add a few here and there. That's kind of semi-meandering here in that little, like a little tiny canyon. And then we go here. Now I'm just gonna follow here. Then I'll see if I paint over these little bands here or not, because they're not that realistic. So I will probably remove them in the next go here or something. And we have 7 more minutes, so it's good. So let's go up here and see where these come from. Okay, here we have a river system that starts up in these 2 lakes, and then I have to go up and see, and here we can see that we have much more, a lot of interesting kind of rock formations and stuff like that. So some of these might be bogs, but so I'm going to keep them as lakes for now and just paint in the rivers and creeks going out of them. And this one is I'm going to say that one is 3 pixels, and I'm going to keep these at 2 pixels each, so they're a little bit more hefty, so to speak. And go in here and just paint them in here. And here I have to be a little bit more exact, because when you have rock formations like this, they will actually, the river will cut into it, so I have to make sure that this line is not wider than the opening in between here. So worst case scenario, I can go in World Machine and make it widen it a bit, but that takes extra time and so on. So I try to go with it, but it's so cool that you can actually manually, you can first let algorithms and fractals create this, and then you can actually go in and manually adjust it to get it the way you want, which is often important when you, like in case of Greyhawk, you have a map to match, so to speak. So but this is a level of detail that is, it's not even heard of anywhere in any of the products and stuff. So that's why I need to, but in order to make the world believable, it needs to have all these kind of cool details. So when you go in and detail it at this level, you need to have lots of cool stuff. And I'm going to, the reason I'm doing this is both for running my campaign now, but also to use this area I'm going to run games, a campaign at D&D in a castle in England next year, and this area here will be that where I will set that campaign in. So it will be like 4 sessions, I think, over 4 days, or 5 or something like that. So that way I'm going to print these maps and use dry erase markers and stuff on them to really, so we can have like an overland chase and they can go around and do stuff. So I haven't decided exactly what game I will run, but and written the story yet, but it will be set in this area. So therefore I can go, and so I need to work hard on it. It's a year, but I need to have this all set up so I can start writing adventures and doing NPCs and order the prints and stuff like that in about 6 months. So, and I need to have a bit more. I have 250 square miles done, so my goal is to have over 1,000 square miles of area to play on when I get that far. And that's why I set my own campaign in the same to develop it, because then I can reuse the NPCs, I can reuse the maps and a bunch of stuff. So there we go. That was okay. So let's do this bit here out into the Nerdiv, and then that will be the last done in this. So it's a little bit of a hodgepodge of mapping streams. So I'm sorry we didn't keep to one theme. So but it's the same general area, and we going a little bit back and forth. So with some game prep mapping and some more kind of, this is more like general area mapping, and this is more of a base level, not the finishing touches. But it's important, all the steps are important, unfortunately. Some of them are more fun than others, and it's good that there are different things to do, because I can go back and forth. When I've done this for 30 or 40 hours, or even 10 hours sometimes, or a day, it's so wonderful to do something else for a day or two, because otherwise it will be boring. If I did this every day, I will be so fed up after a week or two that I don't want to. So that's why I want to have like the shields, heraldry, and so, and then I have World Machine, and sometimes it's 3D programming, and then it's back into Photoshop texturing, and then it's splat map making, and yeah, and sometimes it's finding the right fonts and things. So thankfully it's very varied, technically varied, and sometimes it's kind of more programming stuff, and sometimes it's very artistic, and sometimes it's in between. And this is kind of in between technical and artistic. This is, from a artistic point of view, it's very basic. It's just simple colors, and it's like something you can do in Paint, in MS Paint. But when it comes to cartography standpoint, it's a lot of things to think about and to get straight. But from the actual painting or artistic standpoint, this is ridiculously simple. Just pure colors, and that's it. Okay, there we go. Okay, I think we done a little bit of progress on this. So I'm working my way along the coast, getting all these little creeks painted in on the splat map. So thank you everyone for watching and your wonderful comments and all that. I'm so happy to have you around. You really help me doing it. So I'm going to post all my links to social media or to my website and my Patreon and my Notion, where I have all my Greyhawk maps and stuff, or you can get them. And I will post, there will be hot Earth and some of the conclusions and stuff on the last bits of the Earth project is coming in the next couple of days to the Notion site. And I will advertise that on Facebook and Twitter and stuff too, so you can look at it. So that's coming in. Thank you again so much for both watching and everyone who help me keep doing this. So it's kind of awesome. So thank you guys. Yeah, thank you Pete Bog. So okay, so I'll catch up with you next week, and I will be on. I don't think Jay on Lord Gusumba channel has Gavin this Sunday. Might have one on Monday. I'm not really sure. But there is a whole bunch of streams and stuff coming next week on Lord Gusumba channel, and we will have a Legends and Lore with Darlene, and hopefully I will be back on Friday again with another live mapping show. Okay, so I'm going to end it here. Thank you, Asher. Goodbye.